Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping into a really deep, I think pretty uncomfortable contradiction today.
A massive one.
Yeah, our sources just lay it bare. We have the technical capacity, the actual ability to provide a decent life for every single person on Earth.
And yet.
And yet poverty, ecological destruction, it just rages on.
And this paradox, it's not theoretical, it's urgent. The human equity crisis is right now.
So immediate.
It is. I mean, you look at global reports from the WHO, from UNICEF, and they show that even with all our wealth and technology, 1 in 4 people, 1 in 4, still don't have access to safely managed drinking water.
That is it's a shocking figure.
We are failing at the most basic level of human need while we're all focused on surplus and luxury.
And that failure is exactly what brings us here. Our mission in this deep dive is to follow that thread, the one connecting global poverty directly to environmental overshoot.
Because they're not separate problems.
Not at all. The sources suggest the solution isn't some technical fix here and another one there. It's about fundamentally redesigning our economic goal.
Shifting away from that endless destructive growth model.
Exactly. Moving towards something more balanced, this concept of sufficiency or, just enough.
And to really grasp sufficiency, you first have to face the scale of the crisis we're already in, this persistent scarcity of things that should have been solved decades ago.
Okay, so let's start right there. Let's start with that immediate human struggle, the water and sanitation crisis. And these numbers, they're not old data. This is a 2025 reality check.
And they reveal just massive gaps. We are talking about 2.1 billion people who lack access to safely managed drinking water.
2.1 billion.
And get this, within that group, over 100 million people are drinking water directly from, untreated surface sources, rivers, ponds.
That's a constant rolling health catastrophe.
It is. It's happening every single day.
And then that health crisis is just compounded by the failures in sanitation, right?
Absolutely. 3.4 billion people don't have safely managed sanitation. And incredibly, 354 million still have to resort to open defecation.
It's hard to even process that number.
But the real deep dive here is how this intersects with social inequality. For example, people in fragile or conflict-affected places. Their drinking water coverage is 38 percentage points lower than in stable countries.
So the most vulnerable get hit the hardest.
Always.
Yeah.
And the sources give us a really striking figure on the gender burden of this.
I saw that.
In places like sub-Saharan Africa, Central and Southern Asia, women and girls spend over 30 minutes a day just collecting water.
Half an hour. Every single day.
And it's not just an inconvenience. That's time that is permanently lost.
Time that could be for education.
Or starting a business or resting. It's a systemic suppression of potential, all built into a lack of basic infrastructure.
And what makes it so frustrating, so infuriating really, is when you see how little it would cost to fix it.
Right. It makes the scarcity look less like an inevitability and more like a choice, a political choice.
Okay, so let's get into those numbers, the economics of this. We can actually put a price tag on ending this kind of poverty.
We can. Researchers use a couple of different metrics.
Right. There's the really low bar first.
Correct. The lowest one is extreme monetary poverty. That's living on $2.15 a day. The annual cost to wipe that out globally, about $70 billion.
But that line is, it's widely criticized as being just impossibly low to actually live on.
It is, which is why the more representative figure is so important. That's the absolute poverty line, set at $3.65 a day.
And that's the one that correlates more strongly with actually being able to access basic education, healthcare, real necessities.
Exactly. And the cost to end poverty at that higher, more realistic standard is about $325 billion a year.
Okay, so $325 billion. Now let's compare that to what's already been promised.
This is the crucial part. The high-income OECD countries, that's the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they committed to delivering what's called Official Development Assistance, or ODA.
And that was supposed to be, what, 0.7% of their gross national income?
Yes. And that commitment translates to roughly $425 billion in aid.
So wait. The money that was promised is significantly more than what's needed to solve absolute poverty.
It is. The money exists. Or at least the commitment to raise it exists.
It just shows that the global community has the financial resources. It's not a shortage of capital.
It's a problem of distribution, of priorities, of political alignment.
Which brings us to the critical turning point in this whole analysis. Because even if we could magically raise and spend that $325 billion, if we do it inside the current economic system, the one based on endless expansion,
we hit a wall, a hard physical wall. The biophysical reality of the planet,
That's the link.
it's the critical link.
Hmm.
You can't spend your way out of poverty if the engine of that spending just accelerates ecological collapse. The whole paradigm has to change.
And this isn't new, is it? I mean, people have been warning about this for decades.
Decades. If you look back at the much maligned 1972 limits to growth model, well, current empirical data shows its trajectory was alarmingly accurate.
Meaning that this idea of business as usual economic growth
Right.
is just not possible.
Precisely. The model predicted that if we didn't change course, industrial output, population, it would all peak and then start to rapidly decline around the year 2040.
And we're on track for that.
Worryingly so.
Yeah.
The current data on resource depletion, on pollution, it aligns very well with that scenario. High-income countries are overshooting multiple planetary boundaries at the same time.
It's not just climate.
No, it's biodiversity loss, nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, land use change. It's a systemic failure.
And when you look at the energy required to fuel our current lifestyle, you see why. Fossil fuels still make up, what, 80% of the global supply?
About 80%, yes. So you can't decarbonize if you insist that everyone, everywhere, must consume at the level of a 21st century American or Western European. It's physically impossible.
So there has to be some kind of contraction.
There has to be a fundamental acknowledgement that maintaining these existing affluence levels, the huge homes, the constant air travel, the throwaway culture, it's just incompatible with planetary survival. The only way forward is a significant intentional economic contraction in the wealthy, high-consuming parts of the world.
But, and this is where it gets really interesting, the equity climate paradox offers a kind of optimistic twist.
It does.
The contraction doesn't have to mean sacrifice for everyone. The problem isn't too many people.
It's maldistribution and completely unnecessary consumption. And the sources on this are just incredible.
Yeah, that one study was a stunner.
A crucial study found that providing a universally decent living standard, and we're talking modern housing, healthcare, quality education, reliable electricity, transit,
All the things we'd want.
all the things, for 8.5 billion people, it would require only about 30% of our current global resource and energy use.
30%. Just let that sink in. That means 70% of everything we currently pull out of the ground, process, ship around the world, and then throw away is
Superfluous. It's effectively waste from the perspective of human well-being.
So what does that 70% even look like in real life?
It's the disposable fast fashion. It's the huge private car driving 2 miles to the store. It's consumption driven purely by advertising, not need. It's the construction of massive luxury homes that sit empty half the year.
And all of that is driven by what the sources call the polluter elite.
Exactly. And the scale of the damage they do is mind-boggling. To hit the 1.5-degree Paris Agreement goal, the data shows the wealthiest 1% of people on Earth need to reduce their emissions by a factor of 30.
A factor of 30.
Meanwhile, the poorest 50% of the world's population could actually increase their emissions by 3 times, and we'd still stay within our carbon budget.
That just completely demolishes the argument that climate action has to be painful for the world's poor.
It proves the burden of contraction falls entirely and justly on the wealthy.
So if the current system is mathematically doomed and so deeply unfair, what's the alternative? What are the blueprints our sources offer for this new sufficiency economy?
The shift is from one paradigm to another. The current one says more production and consumption is always better.
Right.
The sufficiency economy says just enough is plenty. It's designed around meeting core human needs first, while respecting those ecological limits we talked about.
But how do you define that? What does that life actually look like on the ground? So it doesn't just feel like, going back to the Dark Ages.
Well, it aims to modestly but comprehensively meet those basic needs: food, shelter, medicine, education, essential energy. But crucially, the goal is to shift our human focus, our energy, away from just acquiring more stuff.
And toward what? What are people doing instead of shopping?
They're focusing on social relationships, on community engagement, creativity, exploring nature, intellectual pursuits. Economically, it implies a much more localized life.
So production moves back to the household, to the local community.
Yes, which minimizes all that resource transport. I think extensive public transport, bicycles, local food supply chains, replacing constant long-distance driving.
That sounds great ecologically, but that idea of radical localization, it does raise some pragmatic questions. Isn't it just inefficient? Doesn't it raise costs? What do the sources say about those trade-offs?
That's a vital tension to address. Localization doesn't mean total isolation. It's about subsidiarity, doing things at the smallest effective level.
Okay.
And while it might raise the cost of, say, cheap mass-produced electronics, the massive savings come from eliminating the global supply chain costs, the marketing, the externalized environmental damage of mass consumption.
So the argument is that the stability and community resilience you gain more than offset any sort of localized inefficiency.
That's the argument, yes.
And for that kind of shift to happen, you need financial emancipation for people, which brings us to this idea the source and propose. Universal Basic Income Plus, UBI Plus.
UBI Plus is that foundational layer. It's universal, unconditional, and adequate to meet basic needs. But that plus is the critical part.
Because it recognizes that just giving everyone the same amount of money doesn't create true equality.
Exactly. Because people don't start from the same line.
Right. Some people have intrinsic extra costs just to participate in society.
Precisely. And the sources focus heavily on disabled people here, framing UBI Plus as an emancipatory movement. Advocates argue it ensures disabled people get additional payments to cover those inherent extra costs of participation.
And those costs can be huge.
They can be substantial. One report cited suggested hundreds of pounds or euros per week just to achieve the same level of freedom and mobility as a non-disabled person.
And the other benefit, the non-financial one, is freeing them from that degrading cycle of constant surveillance and assessment from the welfare state.
Yes. They're freed from having to constantly prove their deficits. Instead, they're supported to define and fulfill their own potential. The focus shifts from what they can't do to what they can contribute.
This all sounds incredibly desirable, but we always come back to the same question, the fiscal realism. Can we actually afford it?
And here we have some really concrete positive evidence from macroeconomic modeling. The example of the Basic Income Guarantee, or BIG, modeled in South Africa, shows that it's fiscally sustainable.
Okay, so how does the funding work in practice?
It's funded by progressive taxation. Primarily two things: a wealth tax on the top 1% and something called a Social Security tax clawback.
A clawback, what does that mean?
It's simple, really. The state gives the basic income to everyone universally, but then it recovers that money from wealthier people through the existing progressive income tax system.
So it acts as a true safety net. The benefit flows directly to those who need it most, and the wealthy essentially just refund their portion.
Precisely.
And what's crucial is that the economic models don't show the economy collapsing, which is the big fear. They actually show the opposite.
They do. The South African models project that the grant is fiscally sustainable, and it can still reduce the poverty rate by up to 2/3 in just 8 years.
And it helps GDP growth.
It contributes positively. It could boost growth from a baseline of, say, 2.2% up to 2.8 or even 3.5% by 2030. The increase in demand from the poorest households far outweighs any negative effects.
So we have the means, the necessity, the blueprint. But the transition itself is not easy. Let's dig into the core philosophical challenge. How do you even define basic needs?
And that is the hurdle, because the definition is not static, it's constantly in flux.
Right. Electricity, high-speed internet.
No.
50 years ago, those were luxuries. Now, in the West, they're almost seen as basic needs for work, for education.
They are. And that's the danger of the shifting goalposts. If you meet today's basic needs, human nature tends to redefine desire upward. We start striving for unsustainable affluence all over again.
And you undo all the ecological gains.
So it requires constant vigilance. The sufficiency movement needs a strong, ongoing social agreement on what truly constitutes enough for a flourishing life. It's a cultural shift away from measuring success by what you own.
Okay, so that's one challenge. The other big one, the one you hear constantly, is the motivation question.
The who will do the dirty jobs question.
Exactly. If everyone's needs are met unconditionally, who's going to do the essential but undesirable work sewage treatment, elder care, trash collection?
Well, that fear is based on the assumption that people are only motivated by desperation. And that's just not true. Yes, some people will still seek paid work for extra things, a vacation, a new car, but freedom from poverty lets people find their real purpose.
And it shifts the balance of power.
Dramatically.
So how does that play out in the actual labor market?
Businesses can no longer rely on economic coercion to get workers. They have to treat people better. They have to raise wages significantly or radically restructure the jobs themselves.
So better conditions, maybe automation?
Exactly. Because their employees are no longer driven by the fear of destitution. If you are free to walk away from degrading work, that work must become dignified.
So ultimately, this shift to sufficiency, it's not really about sacrifice, is it? It's about recognizing that material wealth is a really flawed way to measure well-being.
It is. I mean, decades of data on human flourishing confirm it. Beyond the point where your basic needs are met, more stuff is a poor substitute for community, for purpose, for healthy relationships, for connection with nature.
So embracing sufficiency could mean embracing a life that's actually richer in all the non-material ways.
Potentially, yes.
So our deep dive today makes it pretty clear. The world is facing a binary choice. The data shows we can't just muddle through this.
We cannot. We either choose to voluntarily transition to a structured, sufficiency-based economy to meet our equity and ecological goals, or we stick with the current growth path and face a forced traumatic contraction when the planet's limits are finally and inevitably reached.
We have the agency to choose the method of contraction.
That's it.
And the really hopeful part is that the sufficiency economy isn't some pie-in-the-sky theory. Our sources point out its elements are already here.
They're in grassroots movements all over the world. Voluntary simplicity, eco-villages, permaculture design, the degrowth communities that are gaining momentum.
It's an embryonic reality showing that it's feasible right now. So if achieving a universally decent life for every single person is possible with just a third of our current global resource use, and if that freedom from material worry allows us all to pursue non-material goals like creativity and community and purpose, we'll leave you with this final provocative thought. If you knew tomorrow that all of your essential needs were met, guaranteed, what would you choose to do with the freedom that enough creates?